So welcome to our portfolio projects rubric. Like I said, we will be breaking down the rubrics that I have used to assess different projects. I am a mentor. I've worked for T-Mobile. I've worked on products for Walmart, Biocon, Starbucks. If you know Lenscart, I've worked for them. I'm an ambassador for Envision, which is a really uh, old school platform for UX designers. And I've mentored at Springboard and, of course, ADP List. I also founded the UX Guys, which is an agency, but is also aimed at bringing a graduate level of design education to the masses. So we're going to jump right in. And like I said, this is a supplement to another session. So if you are watching this later, there's another video that you can refer to. And you should ideally go through that first. But if you are live, don't worry about it. You can always go back to it. And of course, I will answer your questions by the end of the session. So now we've discussed earlier that your projects should ideally have a storyline. So let's take a look at how each project or topic is graded. And I'll let you guys go back to your portfolios. If you already have some, you can go back and grade your own projects. And you can see what's missing, and hopefully you can solve for what you think that the HR and the design manager need to see. Because again, like I said, at this point, it could be an HR rep also looking at it, and it could also be at a design manager level. So keep both in mind when we're going through this. Now, when we're looking at the first step of your project, now you do want to make sure that it is, like I said, in a story format and follows the design process roughly. So we start with persona. And as I said, it should exceed, okay, let's talk about the rubric before we go into the points. So as you can see, we have either project or topic listed over here. Now this could be a part of your entire project, or it could be a minor project and you're talking specifically about your role in an entire project and how you broke down a particular aspect of the research process or the design process to help with the product. And you were able to make design decisions based on the data that you collected, right? Then you're going to see a column that says exceeds expectations, a column that says meets expectations, a column that says needs improvement, and then below expectations. So if you are here, I would suggest that you go through a stronger course. I know that a lot of you are just starting out, so don't be too hard on yourself if you feel like you're finding yourself over there a lot. You just need to brush up on your fundamentals. With these three, you'll see that it's really just a matter of presenting your work. A lot of the times you've done the work right, but it isn't coming across and it isn't looking holistic on your portfolio, and it isn't something that a design manager can understand. So let's go through personas. The first thing that you want to make sure is that it is reflecting data points that can be leveraged during the solution stage, right? So I'm going to move over to what are these data points like. So we want to figure out what is the archetype that the persona falls into. We may have a fictional name, that's optional. Job titles and major responsibilities, if applicable. Demographics such as age, education, ethnicity, and family status, if relevant. Now, if it's going to make sense as a data point or something that will inform your design going forward, and you do want to have these different points in. Then you want to define the needs, problems, and pain points, motivations, and goals. That's fairly straightforward. Their physical, social, technological environment. So how do they take to the application that you're developing or the website that you're designing. A quote that sums up what matters most to the persona as it relates to the problem, and that's very important. I say it's optional, but I have to say that companies with a higher UX maturity are looking for this. Companies that are kind of scattered all over the place. So it's important. And going back to what we covered earlier is that you want to make sure you're aiming at the industry or the company that you see yourself in down the line. And you can start to tailor all your documentation according to that. So the higher the UX maturity, the more data points they're looking for. And then we come down to attributes that are relevant to the problem space. Again, you want to make sure that you are addressing any of the design decisions that you took or your team took. And then a casual picture, again, this is optional. You could always go with an animation, especially if this is an academic project. You can go ahead and come up with an illustration that would best represent your user group. So coming back to what else you need to show. You need to show that you have an understanding of the value that the persona would add. So a lot of times I get asked in interviews, or I have in the past when I was applying for junior roles, whether or not I use personas and why. So again, you want to be mindful of the company you're applying to or the kinds of companies you're applying to. If you're applying to an agency, they may not use this. They may not use personas. But if it's a product company with a higher UX maturity, they are looking for a step-by-step documented process. So you do want to have a clear stand on why you don't use personas. Okay, I use personas, and there's a reason, and it actually comes in the next column. So really quickly, I'm going to switch back, and I'm going to mute you guys, unless you have a question. Is someone trying to ask a question, or can I go ahead and mute you? Who is it? Okay, so I think no questions. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mute you. Okay. All right. Well, feel free to drop in any questions on chat. And like I said, I will come back and I will answer your questions by the end. So coming back to this, we do want the persona to be in line with the synthesis of the empathy map as well. So I personally, again, with a higher UX maturity, you do want to have an empathy map right after a persona. So now let's move over to meets expectations for the persona. Now, this is why I like to use personas, is when you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, this is going all the way back, dial all the way back to the beginning of your course or the beginning of your boot camp, where you were studying about how personas are developed, the different stages, and so on. When we're looking at the users and what their needs are, the first thing that we want to understand is how to prioritize the pain points that we come up with. And I found that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you could just do a quick Google search on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and you'll get that pyramid. Are you guys familiar with it? Okay, so I see that you're not familiar with it. So what I can do is, towards the end, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up on the screen and we can discuss it. But it's essentially a pyramid that talks about what is most important to an individual. Now, this is a much deeper understanding of our user, right? And when we start to uncover that they're having problems either using our application or our interface, or they're having problems before we start to develop it and design it. How important is it to a human? Is it something that affects them to a deeper level? Is it something that is a safety need, a safety concern? Because that is the most important pain point that you want to address when you're designing. So we'll come back to this, and maybe by the end of persona, I'll bring it up. So what you want to do is you want to understand whether or not this pain point that you have identified through your persona exercise, how important is it? Okay. Or if you aren't aligned with your empathy map. So let's say you have a persona that is, let's say we're designing a school or a classroom application where you get to upload assignments, right? Okay, let me go back in again, mute somebody. Okay. Okay, so I'm muting you on purpose, but do you have a question? Okay. All right. So let's say we're designing a school or a classroom app where you get to upload assignments and you're focusing on the student. However, your empathy map starts to talk about how the student is saying or feeling something that does not fall in line with their persona or their character. So there's going to be a misalignment between your persona and your empathy map. So that also comes back when we're looking at empathy mapping. That's also something that comes up. Okay, let's look over to needs improvement. If you're missing 3 to 4 data points from what we just discussed, or there's a misalignment with your empathy map, you need to improve it. You need to show, again, you need to show your design manager that you can perform this part of the design without them having to manage you. So these are what design managers feel are basic stages of a design, and they would like to assign projects to you as soon as you join. That's good. Okay. All right. And as you can see below, expectations is fairly straightforward, so I won't go too deep into that. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull up Maslow's hierarchy of needs on the side, so you guys can go ahead and take a look at what it is we're talking about here, because it is really important before we move on to the next step. Okay, so what I'm going to do is switch over. And let me know if you can see this.
Hi, Ashima.
Hey.
Ashima, so I'm not getting your point. So how to get missing data points and as well misalignments? Can you give me some brief or some practice?
Sure. What we could do is, for practice, I think what we can do is set up a one-on-one. But for now, let me talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then we'll move back to the data points.
Okay.
So hopefully you guys can see my screen right here, and I've pulled up a really rough diagram, but this is essentially what we're looking at. When we're looking at, now Maslow was a psychologist, and this is a very well-known diagram that he came up with, and this is pretty old. So this is something that when we as humans start to have experiences out in the world, this is what's most important, is physiological needs, right? Like air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction. Most applications don't focus on this, or even if they do, for example, there's food delivery, that you have to understand is a very basic need. So that's why people tend to have more averse reactions to if a food delivery app is not working well, or is delayed, or is not informing the user that your delivery representative is going to be late. Right? So while we do, as designers, work on applications and systems that deal with certain aspects of the bottom rung of the pyramid, it isn't something that we are highly focused on. When it comes to safety, however, for example, for example, the EU has different guidelines for um, cookies, right? They have a different cookie policy. That is something that you do want to inform your user every time they get on a page, which is, of course, as you can see, is frustrating, but it is down here. It is a very important need. You do have to make sure that they are aware, they are safe, they feel safe. We do, as designers, deal with a lot of health applications as well. So if you see that a persona or a person, you may be designing for a bunch of people, but your archetype of, let's say, older people, people between the ages of 50 and 70 that are using your application, have health factors involved. You want to address those pain points for that persona early on in their journey. And that's a design decision you're going to have to take based on this. So hopefully I'm being clear. Does that make sense? So let me know if that cleared out what is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can always do a quick search, go in and check it out. And I think what I'm also going to do is add this resource in on our Discord. Okay, so I'm gonna switch back to what we were talking about. And I can talk about what are the data points. Okay, so going back to this right here, I would call these data points under persona, under that topic or under that project. So hopefully, does that make sense?
Achima, so based on Maslow diagram, so we can get data points from the diagram. Am I right?
That diagram is going to inform you the priority of the pain point that you have identified. You're going to identify a bunch of pain points. Now, business is not going to be interested in solving all of the pain points. They're going to say MVP is only going to handle this, our second release is going to handle this, and we don't have the bandwidth to cover it all. So I'm just talking about it more realistically. And when you are, of course, you want to advocate for your users, you want to solve all the pain points, and that happens a lot. But when you go into a business setting and when your design manager is looking at your work, again, you want to show that you are able to prioritize what works and what is the most important, what is going to make the product sticky, what is going to eliminate the most important pain points for your user. So, does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay, I'm going to move forward in the
I have
interest of
Ashma. Hi, Lakshya this side. I have a question. I am unable to make out the direct relation. What is it between the persona and the empathy map? Uh, and I mean, if we have figured out that this is our persona, this is their frustration, this is what we have to target at as a MVP, then what is the need of an empathy map? Because we have a clear picture who is our user, or what is their need in a bigger picture. So how does empathy map distinguish from a persona? Because we are also mentioning the needs over there.
So before starting out any project, the first thing that you really want to do is have a research plan outlined. And once you outline your research plan, again, that's going to be a live document. You aren't going to follow it to the T, right? What you're going to do is start with a persona, move on to generally, I strongly suggest empathy map because it validates everything you have within your persona document. So empathy map is essentially just helping you as a designer get into your user's shoes even more, even better, even more effectively. So there is no way that it could be a bad step for a designer to do more research, more exercises that could get you in the user's shoes. But to a design manager, when you put in to your portfolio that you can empathy map, that's really what we're looking at when it comes to specifically portfolios, right? So you do want to show that you can do it. Now, in a business setting, you may not have the opportunity to actually execute all
True.
of these because you're not going to have the time. So your design manager is also looking to see that you are able to knock out this exercise, you are familiar with the exercise, and if you have a persona outlined and defined, your empathy map should not take more than a half a day, and that's stretching it. So your design manager is now getting an idea of the fact that you are able to extrapolate data from here and move it down here and then validate your previous step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that did. Thanks. Yeah.
Great. So when it comes to portfolios, you really do want to demonstrate your skills. You really do want to show that you are able to conduct it. Now, be mindful that you are right now in an academic setting and you are still learning. And if I could get like a quick show of where you are right now in your journey, are you just starting out? Are you done with a course? Or are you putting your portfolio together? Or are you done with all of these and are you applying for a job? You could just type in 1, 2, 3, or 4, and it'll give me an idea of where you guys are at. So I can start to tailor all my speaking points to you. So just started for Austin Williams. So I see that you guys are pretty familiar with the design process for great. Awesome. Putting up a portfolio, so that's 3, perfect. So yeah, so you guys are familiar with the design process, how it works. You want to showcase that you are able to do all of it. And this time you want to showcase that you are able to handle it in a business setting and not just an academic setting. So you do want to be mindful of the fact that there are certain business requirements that will be handed to you, and all of the design research, the process, the wireframing that you do is going to supplement the design or the business requirements, and it's going to be a layer on top of it. So that's also something that you want to showcase. Now, that will honestly, in my experience, that has come out more in an interview. So right now, what we're trying to do is get these people to give you a call back and set up that interview. So that's really why we're looking at this rubric, right? So let's take a look at an empathy point or an empathy map. Now you want to make sure that it reflects the data points that can be leveraged through the solution stage. Again, you want to zero in on, like what is your persona thinking, doing, feeling through the day. It may not even be when they're using the application, but you may realize that, my persona right here, maybe you've documented that they wake up early. And if it's a health application, that's your design, that's where you can base your design decision on. Okay, well, they wake up early, so I can send them a push notification before breakfast to test their blood sugar level, right? That you want to validate throughout. If you find something that you can solve early on, you want to validate through every step, and that's really what you want to show. All quadrants are filled, and it is in line with the synthesis of the persona. Okay, so that exceeds expectations. When you meet your expectations, you're able to see that users' goals are clear, all quadrants are filled, and of course are aligned with the persona. So really what you want to do if you want to exceed expectations is validate before and after. So the research step that you took before should have an indication that that's a pain point that you need to solve. Here's where you validate it, and then in the next step you validate it some more. Needs improvement is if quadrants seem incomplete or they seem interchanged. Sometimes a lot of, I think, thinks and feels is what I see interchanged. So if you're confused, just go back to, I always say, Nielsen Norman. They have a great video, actually, and that'll take not too long for you to go over and just refresh your memory on what needs to go where. Okay, that's fairly straightforward. I'm not going to go too deep into that. Okay, so when you're talking about surveys and interviews, you want to make sure that your questions are following a narrative. You're using language that does not lead the user, and there's incentive for the user to answer all the questions. So by that, it just means that, especially in interviews, you have developed a rapport. You have let them feel comfortable enough that they can tell you that your product sucks. So that's something that they're looking for. The knack for making the user feel comfortable. And what you want to do if you're putting it on a portfolio is just find a snippet of it. Now, this has to be a key moment of your interview, and it has to show how you were able to. This could even be something where you're not actually getting a pain point. You could be reading between the lines of what they said. You could be just making them feel comfortable. It could just be a point that you're both laughing, and it shows that you have you've established this professional relationship with them where they feel like they can tell you your product sucks. So that's really what a design manager is looking for, especially if you're applying for a UX research position. You do want to pull up more key moments of your interview. Of course, you want to show that you have their consent. That's also something that you could attach as an external link, not a major part of your portfolio. You want to show that you were able to gain their trust, and how did you gain their trust? So that's something that you want to be aware of. When it says appropriate question formats used, that means, did you use an open-ended question? Did you use the Likert scale, which is also known as ratings? Or did you ask them to elaborate on something, which is, again, open-ended, not leading, but focused? Then when it comes to meets expectations, there are some times that when I'm hiring, I see certain people come up with unnecessary questions. That just means that the question that we're talking about doesn't have a direct link to the design that was finally executed. So essentially, we weren't able to gauge anything from that question, and it didn't inform the design. So you want to make sure that either your question leads to the next question if it doesn't have a direct repercussion, or it's something that you have thought out, and that's what they're looking for. And of course, you want to make sure that there's an appropriate flow of question. You don't want to be like, so what was your experience like when you used this? And then you go all the way back to, did you have trouble logging in? So it should be in order of either usage, or it should be in order of the journey that they took as a user. Um, okay, just wanted to check in if you had any questions. Feel free to drop it in chat. So moving on to needs improvement. Now, if your
Ashma,
questions are leading,
Ashma, I have a question regarding survey and interview.
mhm,
So I was practicing design thinking once, and I mean, I had jot down all the questions which I wanted to ask. My case study was over the artisans of India. What are their pain points and what they need, right? So, if we talk about the misguided or unnecessary questions, because many of the artisans were hesitant about being questioned, or
mhm.
being they were reluctant to answer anything. They didn't wanted to spend such time over such research. So if we talk about the misguided question, what do you mean by that? I didn't get it actually. uh, and what is
Okay,
its
let's talk
purpose?
about it now. So a misguided question. So let me jump into this. So questions that are leading or misguided questions. So that is essentially, like I said, you don't want to lead your user. You don't want to say, and you found this really annoying, right? So that is a leading question. A misguided question could be something that sends them off into a tangent that would, again, not be related to what you're working on. So if you do have questions about interviews and surveys, again, I would strongly suggest, and I say this to all my mentees, check out Nielsen Norman. They have a brilliant compilation of articles and posts and videos that you could refer to. And I think that they are just the right amount of cognitive load, all of these posts, and they're able to really break it down without making it boring, but it's very strong in its fundamentals. So check out Nielsen Norman. So yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Just a second. Yeah, you absolutely did. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mhm.
Lovely. Again, I'm not going to go into broad expectations. When it comes to user journey maps, you want to show that. Now, I've written all 5 stages, but it depends on the format that you're working with. So you do want to show all of the stages. You want to show familiarity with not necessarily Miro, but it could be also FigJam. This is really where you're starting to also show that you're able to handle tools, and you're able to understand their functionality, you know, shortcuts, stuff like that. That's something that design managers, again, look out for. And if you're fresh talent, if you're new to the field, if you're going in for a junior UX position, they really do expect you to be, your understanding of tools to be a lot higher. So that's something that you want to start showing off with your user journey maps, your wireframes, your animations, but we'll get to that later. So, so you really do want to show all the stages, and you want to show actionable insights. Now, keep in mind that user journey map has opportunities section, right? Um, some of them don't, but most of them that are used out there and are accepted have an opportunities section, and that's where you want to show actionable insights. Mostly because when you're at your user journey map stage, you ideally have finished all these other research methods, and you're done collecting data from there. So at this point, you are at a point that you can validate all of the findings that you did. And you can start to write down solutions that go with each of the pain points. Right? And this could be UI specific. This could show that you understand the OS. This could show that you understand design patterns. So this is where you start to show that you are able to take that and take your analysis and turn it into synthesis. So this is where the design manager is understanding that, okay, this candidate can do this. When it comes to meets expectations, you want to show your pain points captured stage-wise, synthesis includes actual insights, and a fair understanding of the tool. Because now, when it comes to tools, I personally, as a design manager and somebody who hires, feels like tools is something that you can pick up later, but the design process is something that you want to be strong on. But again, like I said, if you are a junior designer, they're already thinking that, okay, I'm going to probably mentor this person. So you want to be cognizant of whom you're applying to, their UX maturity, and then make sure that you're able to meet those design managers' expectations. You probably need improvement if there's no distinction among students. That's something that I've seen a lot. And I've also seen people come up with insights that are brilliant, but it isn't something that you can apply to the interface. Or it's too zealous in the sense that it's too gesture heavy, or it's too, you're relying on AI or chatbot, and that's something that is not what we're doing. Not saying that AI or chatbot is something that is out of the question. You just want to be careful about who your audience is. You want to treat this as a UX project yourself. Right now, your target audience is a design manager, right? And you want to make sure that all of these things that you are showcasing are coming across clearly, and they're coming across quickly because they don't have the time to make their decision. They have other things to do. They have other portfolios to go through. They have to go back to that team meeting. They have to go back to the call hands. They have to go back and answer to their higher ups or the. So this is what they're doing. Okay? That's just giving you an idea of what's going on in their mind. You want to show all of these things very clearly when it comes to information architecture. Okay, so I'll just do a quick check-in to see your questions. Okay, so the recording for this will be on YouTube, and I will drop the link in on our Discord. Luigi asks if we need to make a consent letter. Okay, so when it comes to academic projects, yes, you do need to type it out yourself, but when you move to a company, they will have their own consent letter. So you don't have to worry too much. You just want to show that you understand how it goes. So, okay. Information architecture. You want to show that you are in the hierarchy of how people think. Features, pages, and information are based on the previous research methods. Card sorting is employed. Ideally, I like to push for card sorting. Another thing that you guys can do is go into LinkedIn, check out the companies that you are targeting at. Check out the people who work there and go check out their portfolios. So that's something that you can do, and that can be a great indicator of whether or not you're going to meet their expectations or not. Ideally, if you are exceeding expectations, you're guaranteed a callback and an interview. So that's really what you're aiming for. Meets expectations kind of gets you at, okay, maybe you're in the maybe pile. And of course, you're out of the game with these two. So information architecture, moving on to meets expectations. You're following hierarchy. You are basing all of this, features, pages, information, on your previous research. For me personally, if you haven't shown how you got to this hierarchy, generally card sorting is the way. you could show any other research method, but if it's missing, then I'm not really sure how you got there. So that doesn't really tell a design manager how you got there and how they can expect you to get there when you're working with them. Okay, so that's that. So those are a few research um, methods and the way that I start to grade them. Let's take a look at a whole project or a major project that you've done end to end, right? We talked about how each part of the piece would go into the entire puzzle, but let's talk about the entire thing. Of course, you want to make sure that each section follows what we just discussed, but as a whole, as a presentation, as your documentation comes across, you want to demonstrate that you have a clear understanding of the design process through and through. So every step that you have taken, you have a proof of concept. Every design decision that you've taken leads back to this is where I got it from. This is the step that I got this button from. So that's really how clear you want to be. Presentation is structured and each step has a clear objective. So again, you want it to be step by step, which is structured. Each step has a clear objective, fairly straightforward. Research methods are successive and each has a proof of concept that justifies the step preceding it. So that's just me reiterating what I said earlier. Analysis precedes synthesis. This is important because a lot of times I see portfolios coming to me where everything looks brilliant, everything is beautiful, there's animations, but I have no idea how they got here. This is just the synthesis, where's the analysis of all these other research methods. Why is this here? Is this something that the user would like, or is this a business decision? How did this even get here? And that's always the way I see it. And that's always the way higher UX maturity organizations also view it. They really do want to know how you got there. Presentation follows brand guidelines and is visually appealing. So that's, again, something that you want to focus on once you're done with, again, like I said, treat it like a UX project. First, start to lay out what goes in your portfolio, what screens you want to showcase, what's the rough work you want to show, and then start to put it together and make it pretty. With meets expectations, it's all very similar, but you're also, again, I've listed an extra point here which says shows capacity to collaborate and communicate amongst teams, and that goes to the exceeds expectations column as well, right? So keep in mind that when you go into the field, you will be working with the dev team. You may be only on the UX team and you have another visual team that you want to communicate with. Sometimes you have a separate UX research team and different UX design team. So you want to show that you are able to understand what goes into what. You can categorize that this is the research part, this is the UI part, and that is essentially what we're going for here, is showing that you are able to handle a project. The manager does not have to come in and micromanage you. That's what you want to show. So just make sure that you're able to demonstrate your skills, soft skills as well as your design skills. So yeah, so that's overall how I grade projects, and that's how you can expect to be graded. So I'm ready to take your questions. If you have